The evening sky had turned a deep purple by the time Anthony Wilson's taxi pulled up to the gleaming entrance of the Westfield Grand Hotel. Rain pattered gently against the windows, and the soft glow of the hotel's golden lights reflected in the puddles gathering on the pavement. Anthony adjusted his plain navy hoodie and rubbed his tired eyes as the driver unloaded his single suitcase from the trunk. "Thanks," Anthony said, handing the driver a generous tip. The man nodded appreciatively and drove off into the rainy night, leaving Anthony standing alone under the hotel's massive portico. To any casual observer, Anthony looked like an ordinary traveler, perhaps a mid-level business professional or a tourist visiting the city. His jeans were slightly faded, his sneakers well-worn but clean, and his hoodie comfortable rather than fashionable. Nothing about his appearance suggested that he was, in fact, the CEO of Horizon Hospitality Group, the very corporation that had acquired the Westfield chain 6 months ago. Anthony took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. These unannounced visits had become a crucial part of his leadership style over the years. "You never truly know what your guests experience until you become one," his mentor had told him when he was just starting out. And those words had stuck with him throughout his 20-year climb in the hotel industry. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, revealing the hotel's grand lobby. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, casting warm light over marble floors and plush velvet furniture. A pianist played soft jazz on a baby grand in the corner, and the subtle scent of fresh flowers permeated the air. Anthony approached the front desk, where a young man in a perfectly pressed uniform greeted him with a practiced smile. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Westfield Grand. How may I assist you today?" "I have a reservation," Anthony replied, handing over his ID and credit card. "Under Wilson?" The clerk's fingers tapped quickly across the keyboard. "Ah, yes, Mr. Wilson. I see your reservation for 5 nights in one of our standard king rooms." The young man's eyes flickered briefly to Anthony's casual attire, his smile faltering for just a second before he caught himself. "Would you prefer something more upscale? We have several suites available." Anthony noted the subtle change in the clerk's demeanor. It wasn't the first time his appearance had prompted such reactions, and he doubted it would be the last. "The standard room will be fine, thank you." "Of course, sir." The clerk continued the check-in process, his tone professionally polite but noticeably cooler. "You're in room 712. The elevators are to your right. Breakfast is served in the main dining room from 6 to 10 a.m., and room service is available 24 hours. Anthony nodded, taking the key card. "Thank you. Do you require assistance with your luggage?" the clerk asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "I can manage," Anthony replied, gripping the handle of his small suitcase. As he walked toward the elevators, Anthony made mental notes about the lobby's condition and the check-in experience. The physical space was immaculate, exactly what he'd expect from a hotel of this caliber. But that subtle shift in the clerk's attitude was concerning. It wasn't outright rudeness, but rather that nearly imperceptible change that happens when someone makes assumptions based solely on appearance. The elevator ride to the 7th floor was quick and smooth. Anthony found his room easily enough, swiping his key card and pushing open the heavy door. Inside, he found a perfectly adequate room, clean and comfortable, if not particularly luxurious. A king-sized bed dominated the space, flanked by nightstands with reading lamps. A small desk sat in one corner, and a flat-screen television hung on the wall opposite the bed. The bathroom was standard, clean white tiles, fluffy towels, and the usual array of miniature toiletries. Anthony set his suitcase on the luggage rack and hung his jacket in the closet. He moved methodically around the room, checking for dust on the surfaces, examining the grout in the bathroom, testing the television and climate control systems. Everything was in working order, though he noticed a slight delay in the heating system's response. The rain outside had intensified, drumming against the window in a steady rhythm. Anthony pulled back the curtains to reveal a view of the city skyline, now a blur of twinkling lights through the raindrops streaming down the glass. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since a hurried lunch at the airport hours ago. He settled into the armchair by the window and picked up the room service menu from the desk. The Westfield Grand prided itself on its culinary offerings, and the menu reflected that with its range of upscale comfort food and international cuisine. After a few minutes of consideration, Anthony decided on a simple burger with fries and a side salad, a good test of any hotel kitchen's basic competence. Anthony reached for the room phone and dialed the number for room service. After 3 rings, a man answered with a clipped, "Room service, how may I help you?" "Good evening," Anthony replied. "I'd like to order dinner, please." "What would you like?" the voice asked, skipping the usual pleasantries. "I'll have the classic burger with fries and a garden salad, please." "Medium well on the burger." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "May I have your room number and name?" "Room 712, Anthony Wilson." Another pause, longer this time. Anthony could hear the faint sound of keyboard clicking in the background. "I'm sorry, sir," the voice finally said, a new edge to his tone. "Room service is no longer available this evening." Anthony frowned, glancing at the digital clock on the nightstand. It was only 9:47 p.m. "I was told at check-in that room service is available 24 hours, he said. "There's been a change in the schedule," the man replied curtly. "The kitchen is closing early tonight due to staffing issues. You can find several restaurants within walking distance of the hotel." As if to contradict this statement, Anthony heard the distinct sound of a room service cart rolling past his door in the hallway. He rose from his chair and moved quietly to the door, peering through the peephole just in time to see an attendant delivering a covered tray to a room down the hall. "I see," Anthony said slowly, returning to the phone. "Could you tell me who I'm speaking with?" "This is Thomas Baker, the night manager," the voice replied stiffly. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" "No, thank you," Anthony said. "That will be all for now." After hanging up the phone, Anthony sat on the edge of the bed, deep in thought. In his 20 years in the hospitality industry, he had encountered all manner of service issues. But this particular interaction raised some troubling questions. Why had he been told room service was unavailable when it clearly was still operating? Was it simply poor communication among the staff, or was there something more concerning at play? Anthony opened his suitcase and retrieved a small notebook and pen. He jotted down the details of the interaction, including the exact time and the name of the night manager. Years of experience had taught him to document everything during these incognito visits, both the good and the bad. His hunger temporarily forgotten, Anthony decided to conduct a simple test. He picked up his phone again, but this time called the front desk. "Front desk, how may I assist you?" A cheerful female voice answered. "Hi, I was wondering what time room service ends tonight." Anthony asked. "Room service is available 24 hours, sir," the woman replied promptly. "Would you like me to connect you?" "No, that's all right. Thank you." Anthony hung up and added this information to his notes. One more test was needed. Anthony took his personal cell phone from his pocket and dialed the hotel's main number, asking to be connected to room service. When someone answered, a different voice this time, he claimed to be calling from room 815, a number he made up on the spot, and placed the same order he had attempted earlier. The response was immediate and accommodating. "Certainly, sir. Your order will be up in about 30 minutes. Anthony ended the call and sat back in the armchair, the pieces falling into place. Something wasn't right about his interaction with the night manager, and he intended to get to the bottom of it. In his position as CEO, Anthony had implemented strict policies against any form of discrimination throughout the Horizon Hospitality Group. The possibility that such behavior might be occurring in one of his hotels, perhaps based on assumptions about his appearance or his ethnicity, was deeply troubling. The rain continued to drum against the window as Anthony considered his next move. He was hungry, yes, but more than that, he was concerned about what might be happening beneath the polished surface of this hotel. If the night manager was selectively denying services to certain guests, how many others had experienced similar treatment? How deeply did this problem run? Anthony glanced at his watch. It was now just past 10 p.m. He would give himself a few minutes to gather his thoughts and plan his approach. Then he would head downstairs to have a conversation with Thomas Baker, the night manager who had no idea that he had just refused service to the CEO of the entire hotel chain. The confrontation that would follow would change not just the course of the evening, but the culture of the entire hotel. But for now, Anthony sat quietly in his room, gathering evidence and preparing himself for what was to come. Anthony stood by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass as he considered his next move. The sound of another room service cart rolling past his door only strengthened his resolve. He had been in the hospitality industry long enough to recognize when something wasn't right, and the night manager's refusal to provide him service while clearly serving other guests raised serious concerns. He picked up the hotel phone one more time and dialed a different room number at random. When a sleepy voice answered, Anthony apologized for the late call. "Sorry to bother you, but I was wondering if you've ordered room service tonight," he asked politely. "Yeah, just got my food about 10 minutes ago," the stranger replied, curiosity evident in his voice. "Why?" "Just checking something." "Thanks for your time," Anthony said before hanging up. He tapped his fingers against the desk, his hunger now secondary to the uncomfortable realization forming in his mind. As CEO of Horizon Hospitality Group, Anthony had implemented strict anti-discrimination policies across all properties. He'd personally conducted training sessions on unconscious bias and had made diversity and inclusion cornerstone values of the company culture. To think that such practices might be happening right under his nose in a hotel bearing his company's name made his blood boil. But Anthony wasn't one to jump to conclusions. He needed more evidence before confronting the night manager. He pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app, jotting down the details of each interaction so far. Then he made another call to the front desk. "Front desk, how may I help you?" It was the same female voice as before. "Hi, this is room 712. I ordered room service earlier but was told it wasn't available. I've just seen several carts going to other rooms. Could you explain why I was refused service?" There was a brief pause. "That's strange, sir. Room service is definitely available. Let me check with the night manager and call you right back." Anthony waited, pacing the room. 5 minutes passed before the phone rang. "Mr. Wilson? This is Lisa from the front desk. I spoke with Mr. Baker and he said there was a misunderstanding. The kitchen is short-staffed tonight, so they're only able to fulfill certain orders, but he'd be happy to take your order now if you'd still like something." Anthony thanked her and hung up, adding this new information to his notes. The explanation made little sense. He had ordered one of the simplest items on the menu, and no mention of limited options had been made during his first call. He decided to test the waters once more. This time he called room service directly, disguising his voice slightly. "Room service, how may I help you?" It was Baker again. "Hello, I'm calling from room 903, Anthony lied, picking a random number. "I'd like to order the classic burger with fries, please." "Certainly, sir. Would you like anything to drink with that?" "Just water, please," Anthony replied, his suspicions growing stronger by the second. "Your order will be up in approximately 30 minutes, Baker said pleasantly. Anthony ended the call and sat heavily on the edge of the bed. There was no longer any doubt in his mind. He was being treated differently than other guests. The question was why. Was it his casual attire, his ethnic background, or perhaps a combination of factors that had led Baker to make assumptions about him? Whatever the reason, it was unacceptable. As CEO, Anthony had a responsibility not just to the company's bottom line, but to every guest who walked through the doors of a Horizon property. If Baker was willing to discriminate against him, someone he perceived as an ordinary guest, how many others had received similar treatment? Anthony changed into a fresh shirt and combed his hair. He slipped his CEO identification card into his pocket, though he hoped he wouldn't need to use it right away. His approach in these situations was always to give staff members the opportunity to correct their behavior before revealing his identity. It was only fair. The hallway was quiet as Anthony made his way to the elevator. A few doors down, he noticed an empty room service tray waiting to be collected, further evidence that the service was indeed operational. His stomach growled again, a reminder of his original mission, but that concern seemed trivial now compared to the larger issue at hand. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and Anthony stepped inside. As he descended to the lobby, he rehearsed what he would say to Baker. He would be calm but direct, giving the night manager a chance to explain himself before taking any action. The lobby was less busy now, with only a few late-night arrivals checking in. Anthony approached the front desk where Lisa, a young woman with a neat ponytail and a professional smile, greeted him. "Good evening, sir. How may I help you?" "I'd like to speak with Mr. Baker, please," Anthony said politely. "Of course. May I tell him what this is regarding?" "Room service," Anthony replied simply. Lisa's smile faltered slightly. "I'll get him for you. "One moment, please." As she disappeared into the back office, Anthony glanced around the lobby. The pianist had gone, and the space felt emptier without the music. A couple sat on one of the velvet couches, speaking in hushed tones over glasses of wine. A businessman typed furiously on his laptop at a corner table. None of them paid any attention to Anthony, standing alone at the front desk in his simple clothes, waiting to confront the man who had denied him service. A minute later, a tall man with graying hair and a crisp black suit emerged from the office. His nameplate read, "Thomas Baker, Night Manager," and his expression was one of practiced patience, the look of someone accustomed to dealing with difficult guests. "Good evening," Baker said coolly. "I understand you have a question about room service?" Anthony met his gaze steadily. "Yes, I do. I called earlier from room 712 to order dinner and was told room service wasn't available. Yet I've seen several room service deliveries since then, and I've confirmed with other guests that they've received food without any issues." Baker's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "As I explained to Lisa, we're short-staffed in the kitchen tonight. We've had to limit the number of orders we can fulfill." "That's interesting," Anthony replied, keeping his voice level, "because when I called again, pretending to be from another room, you took my order without hesitation. Same menu item, same time frame." A muscle twitched in Baker's jaw. "There must have been some miscommunication." "I don't think so," Anthony said. "I think you took one look at my reservation details, or perhaps made assumptions based on my name or room type, and decided I wasn't worth serving. What I'd like to know is why." Baker straightened his tie, buying time. "Sir, I assure you that's not the case. Perhaps there was a system error when you first called. If you'd like to place an order now, I'd be happy to." "That's not the point," Anthony cut in, his patience wearing thin. "The point is that you lied to me. You denied me service that you provided to others, and now you're making excuses instead of taking responsibility." The night manager's face hardened. "Sir, I understand you're upset, but I think you're blowing this out of proportion. If you continue to cause a scene, I'll have to ask you to keep the conversation to a more appropriate volume." Anthony noticed a few heads turning in their direction. Lisa watched from behind the desk, her expression uncomfortable. Baker clearly thought he was dealing with an ordinary guest, someone who could be intimidated or dismissed. "I'm not causing a scene," Anthony said quietly. "I'm asking for an explanation for discriminatory service practices, which is my right as a guest in this hotel." Baker's smile was thin and cold. "I've explained the situation, sir. If you're unsatisfied with my explanation, you're welcome to speak with the general manager in the morning. Now, if there's nothing else I can help you with." He began to turn away, clearly considering the matter closed. It was a dismissal Anthony had seen countless times in his years of incognito visits. Staff who believed they could simply wait out a complaint until the guest gave up or went away. "Actually," Anthony said, reaching into his pocket, "there is something else." He pulled out his identification card and corporate credentials, holding them up for Baker to see. "My name is Anthony Wilson. I'm the CEO of Horizon Hospitality Group, the parent company of this hotel, and I'd like you to explain to me right now why you felt it was acceptable to refuse service to a guest based on what I can only assume were prejudiced assumptions." The color drained from Baker's face. His mouth opened and closed without sound, like a fish suddenly finding itself out of water. Behind him, Lisa's eyes widened in shock, her hand flying to her mouth. I didn't," Baker stammered, his composure completely shattered. "Didn't what?" Anthony pressed. "Didn't know who I was?" "That's precisely the point, Mr. Baker. No guest in any of my hotels should be treated differently based on who they are, or who you perceive them to be." By now, the few people in the lobby had fallen silent, watching the scene unfold with undisguised interest. Anthony was aware of the audience but kept his focus on Baker, whose forehead had broken out in a light sweat. "Mr. Wilson, I can explain," Baker finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I certainly hope so," Anthony replied, slipping his ID back into his pocket, "because right now what I've witnessed runs contrary to everything this company stands for. And I'm very interested to hear how you plan to justify your actions." The night manager swallowed hard, glancing around at the watching eyes before turning back to Anthony. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and they both knew it. What had begun as a simple request for room service had exposed a deeper problem, one that Anthony was now determined to address, not just for his own sake but for every guest who might walk through the doors of the Westfield Grand. Perhaps we should continue this conversation in private, Baker suggested weakly, gesturing toward the office. Anthony nodded. I think that would be wise. After you, Mr. Baker. As they walked toward the office, Anthony caught Lisa's eye and gave her a reassuring smile. Whatever happened next would certainly be uncomfortable for Baker, but it would also be fair. Anthony had built his career on treating people with respect and dignity, and he expected no less from those who represented his brand. The night manager's hand trembled slightly as he opened the office door, stepping aside to let Anthony enter first. The CEO of Horizon Hospitality Group walked in with his head held high, prepared to have one of the most important conversations of Thomas Baker's career, one that would change the culture of the Westfield Grand forever. The office door closed with a soft click behind them. Thomas Baker hurried to clear a stack of papers from a visitor's chair, his movements jerky and uncertain. Anthony remained standing, taking in the cramped space with its outdated furniture and walls covered in spreadsheets and schedules. Please, have a seat, Mr. Wilson, Baker said, his voice struggling to maintain its professional tone. Anthony sat down, placing his phone on the desk between them. I think you know why we're here, Mr. Baker. The night manager lowered himself into his chair, tugging nervously at his tie. There's been a misunderstanding, sir. I would never intentionally— Let me stop you right there, Anthony interrupted, his voice calm but firm. I didn't become CEO by being easily fooled. I called for room service. You denied me. I confirmed that service was available to other guests. These are facts, not misunderstandings. Baker's gaze dropped to his desk. Sweat beaded on his upper lip despite the cool temperature of the office. It's been a difficult night, sir. We're short-staffed and— Is that why you served the guest in room 815 without hesitation when I called pretending to be them? Or why the couple in 903 received their dinner just before I came downstairs? Anthony leaned forward slightly. I've been in the hospitality industry for over 20 years, Mr. Baker. I know when I'm being lied to. The night manager's face paled further. Sir, I'm not interested in excuses, Anthony said. What I want to know is why. Why did you deny service to me specifically? What was it about me or my reservation that made you decide I wasn't worth the same treatment as other guests? Baker swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. Finding none, he sighed deeply. It wasn't personal, Mr. Wilson. It's just, we have a certain standard to maintain. When guests book the basic rooms, especially during peak season, we sometimes need to prioritize our services. Anthony felt his anger rise but kept his expression neutral. Prioritize based on what criteria exactly? Room category, length of stay, frequency of visits, Baker mumbled, not meeting Anthony's eyes. It helps us manage our limited resources. Is that written policy anywhere? Because I've never seen it in any of our training materials or operational guidelines. Anthony knew perfectly well it wasn't. He had personally reviewed every policy implemented across Horizon's properties. Baker remained silent, answering the question with his discomfort. Let me be clear, Anthony continued. What you're describing is not prioritization. It's discrimination. You're creating a two-tiered system of service based on assumptions about guests' value to the hotel. He paused, watching Baker's reaction. But I suspect there's more to it than just my room category, isn't there? The night manager shifted in his seat but said nothing. Anthony decided to change tactics. I'd like to see the room service records from tonight. Please, sir, I'm not sure if the records. Mr. Baker, now. With obvious reluctance, Baker turned to his computer and pulled up the night's room service log. He swiveled the monitor toward Anthony, who leaned forward to scan the information. The data told a clear story. During the past 3 hours, 27 room service orders had been fulfilled. Anthony noted the room numbers, matching them against his mental map of the hotel. Most orders had gone to the executive suites and premium rooms, but several had gone to standard rooms as well, just none occupied by guests with names suggesting diverse backgrounds. I see, Anthony said quietly, sitting back in his chair. Now I'd like to see the guest registry for those rooms. Baker hesitated. Mr. Wilson, that would be a violation of nothing, Anthony cut in. I'm the CEO. I have full access rights to all operational data. The registry, please. With trembling hands, Baker pulled up another screen. Anthony reviewed the information carefully, comparing names, room types, and service records. His suspicions were confirmed. Guests with Western-sounding names in standard rooms had received service, while those with names suggesting different cultural backgrounds had been denied or delayed. Anthony felt a cold anger settle in his chest. This wasn't just poor service or casual discrimination. This was systematic. He stood up abruptly. "I need to make some calls," he said. "Don't leave this office." Stepping outside, Anthony closed the door behind him and walked a short distance down the hallway. He needed to gather more information before deciding how to proceed. He pulled out his phone and called David Chen, Horizon's head of operations. "David, it's Anthony. Sorry about the late hour, but this is important." He quickly explained the situation at the Westfield Grand. "That's completely unacceptable," David said, his voice tense with anger. "Do you want me to call the regional manager?" "Not yet," Anthony replied. "I want to handle this personally, but I need some information. Can you pull up the guest complaint records for the Westfield Grand over the past 6 months? Look specifically for patterns in room service denials or delays." "Give me a few minutes," David said. While waiting, Anthony paced the hallway thinking, if this was a pattern rather than an isolated incident, it would require more than just disciplinary action against Baker. It would mean a fundamental review of practices and culture at this property. His phone buzzed 5 minutes later. "Anthony, I've got the data. There's definitely a pattern here. We've had 23 complaints about room service at the Westfield Grand in the past 6 months. 19 of them came from guests with non-Western names, mostly in standard rooms. The excuses range from kitchen closing early to staff shortages to system errors." Anthony closed his eyes briefly, processing this information. Any indication that management was aware of this pattern? Hard to say definitively, but the regional manager did flag an unusually high number of service complaints at this property. He scheduled a review for next month. "Too late," Anthony said grimly. "What about staff diversity at this location? How does it compare to our other properties?" "Significantly lower," David replied after a moment. "About 30% below the company average for front-facing positions. And there's been higher turnover among staff members from minority backgrounds. I've heard enough. Send me those reports right away. And David, I want you to come down here first thing tomorrow morning. We've got work to do." Anthony ended the call and stood for a moment, collecting his thoughts. This was bigger than one night manager's poor decisions. It suggested a culture problem that had been allowed to fester. As CEO, he bore ultimate responsibility for every guest's experience across all Horizon properties. This situation reflected directly on his leadership. He made one more call before returning to the office, this time to Patricia Reynolds, Horizon's general counsel. "Pat, we have a situation that needs your immediate attention," he said when she answered. He outlined what he'd discovered so far. "I need to know our options here legally and from a company policy standpoint." Patricia was silent for a moment, processing. "Based on what you're describing, this is a clear violation of our anti-discrimination policies, as well as potentially state and federal public accommodation laws. You have grounds for immediate termination of the night manager. As for the broader cultural issues, that's going to require a more comprehensive approach." "That's what I thought," Anthony said. "Draw up the termination paperwork and email it to me right away. I'll handle it tonight." "Will do." "And Anthony, good catch. This could have become a much bigger problem if left unchecked." Anthony ended the call and checked his email. David had already sent over the complaint records, which Anthony quickly reviewed, confirming the pattern. What had started as a simple room service denial had uncovered a systemic problem that could have serious ramifications for the company, if not addressed immediately. Taking a deep breath, Anthony returned to the office where Baker waited, looking increasingly anxious. "Mr. Baker," Anthony said as he closed the door behind him, "I've reviewed the complaint records for this property over the past 6 months. There's a clear pattern of discriminatory service practices, particularly regarding room service. Did you know about this?" Baker's eyes widened. We've had some service issues, yes, but I wouldn't characterize them as—" "The data says otherwise," Anthony interrupted. 19 out of 23 complaints came from guests with names suggesting diverse backgrounds. That's not a coincidence. "We serve hundreds of guests each week," Baker protested weakly. "A few complaints. One complaint is too many when it's based on discrimination," Anthony said firmly. "But this isn't about numbers. It's about people. Real people who came to this hotel expecting the service we promise in our marketing materials, only to be treated as second-class guests. Baker fell silent, his expression a mixture of defiance and fear. "I'd like you to explain something to me," Anthony continued, sitting down again. "When I called for room service earlier, what specific factors led you to deny my request?" The night manager shifted uncomfortably. "As I mentioned, room category is one factor we consider when—" "But other guests in standard rooms receive service tonight," Anthony pointed out. "What else made you decide I wasn't worth serving?" Baker's silence spoke volumes. "Was it my name?" Anthony pressed. "Did you look at Anthony Wilson and make assumptions about who I might be? Or did you check my reservation details and notice I'd paid with a standard credit card rather than a premium one? Perhaps you saw my address or some other detail that led you to profile me?" "It wasn't like that," Baker muttered. "Then explain it to me. Because right now, all evidence points to a pattern of systematic discrimination at this property. A pattern that stops tonight." Baker looked up, his expression hardening slightly as he seemed to realize the futility of further denials. "You don't understand the pressures we face. We have limited resources and high expectations from corporate. Sometimes difficult choices have to be made about service prioritization. Corporate, meaning me, has never instructed any property to discriminate in service delivery," Anthony stated firmly. "In fact, we've been explicit about the opposite. Every guest deserves equal treatment regardless of room category, appearance, name, or background." "That's not just a nice sentiment. It's core to our business model and our values as a company." Anthony stood up, his decision made. "Mr. Baker, your actions tonight and the pattern they represent are in direct violation of Horizon Hospitality Group's policies. More importantly, they violate the basic principles of human decency and respect that any service industry should uphold." He pulled out his phone, opening the email Patricia had just sent. "Effective immediately. Your employment with Horizon Hospitality Group is terminated." Baker's face went from pale to red in an instant. "You can't—" "I can and I have," Anthony said, his voice level. "You'll receive 2 weeks severance pay, contingent upon signing a non-disclosure agreement. You'll surrender your keys and access cards tonight, and be escorted from the property. Human Resources will contact you tomorrow regarding the retrieval of any personal belongings." The night manager sat frozen, the reality of his situation slowly sinking in. "This is outrageous. I've worked for this company for 7 years. Which makes your actions even more disappointing," Anthony replied. "You knew our policies, yet you chose to ignore them. I can't allow that to continue, not for one more night." He walked to the door and opened it. "Lisa," he called to the front desk clerk, who looked up immediately. "Please come here for a moment." As she approached, Anthony turned back to Baker. "Pack your personal items. You have 15 minutes. Lisa stood in the doorway, her eyes darting nervously between Anthony and Baker. The tension in the small office was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Yes, Mr. Wilson?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lisa, I need you to contact hotel security and have them meet us here in 15 minutes, Anthony said calmly. "Mr. Baker will be leaving the property tonight. Also, please call Roy from maintenance and ask him to change the access codes for the management offices and computer systems." Her eyes widened, but she nodded professionally. "Right away, sir." As Lisa hurried off, Baker sat motionless, staring at the desk. The fight seemed to have drained out of him, replaced by a shocked numbness. He slowly began gathering personal items from his desk, a framed photo, a coffee mug, a few notebooks. "This is a mistake," he finally said, not looking up. "You're overreacting to one misunderstanding." Anthony shook his head. "We both know it wasn't just one misunderstanding. The data shows a clear pattern, and your own words confirmed it. This isn't about making an example of you, Mr. Baker. It's about upholding the standards and values that this company was built on." Baker's jaw tightened. 7 years of service thrown away over a burger and fries. "No," Anthony said firmly. 7 years thrown away because you decided some guests deserve better treatment than others, based on their names or appearances or room categories. That was your choice, not mine. Anthony stepped out into the hallway, giving Baker some privacy to pack his things while still keeping an eye on him through the open door. He took the moment to send a quick message to David Chen, confirming that he'd handled the immediate situation and would need a temporary night manager sent over until a permanent replacement could be found. His phone buzzed with David's reply. "Sending Gabriela Torres from the downtown location. She can be there within an hour. Should I notify the rest of the staff?" Anthony typed back, "Not yet. I want to address them personally in the morning. Have Gabriella come directly to me when she arrives." By the time Baker had gathered his belongings into a small cardboard box, security had arrived, 2 officers in crisp uniforms who stood at a respectful distance, waiting for instructions. "Mr. Baker," Anthony said, "these officers will escort you to your car. Your final paperwork will be prepared by HR tomorrow. I'll need your access cards and keys before you leave." With trembling hands, Baker removed his key card and several physical keys from his pocket, placing them on the desk without meeting Anthony's eyes. The security officers stepped forward, one taking the box of personal items, the other gesturing toward the back exit. "This way, sir," the security officer said quietly. Baker paused at the door, finally turning to face Anthony. "You have no idea what it's like to actually run a hotel day to day. All those fancy policies from corporate sound great on paper, but down here in the real world, we have to make tough calls." Anthony held his gaze steadily. "I started as a bellhop 30 years ago, Mr. Baker. I've worked every position in the hotel business, from dishwasher to front desk to management. I understand the real world of hospitality better than most, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that discrimination is never the answer to operational challenges." Baker looked as if he wanted to say more, but instead turned and walked out with the security officers. His shoulders slumped in defeat. Anthony watched them go, then returned to the office. He needed to get the hotel back on track immediately. With the night manager gone, the remaining staff would need clear direction and reassurance. Lisa appeared in the doorway, her expression anxious. "Mr. Wilson, is there anything else you need from me?" Anthony regarded her thoughtfully. "Yes, Lisa. I'd like you to gather all on-duty staff for a brief meeting in the employee break room in 10 minutes. Also, who's the most senior person on staff tonight after Mr. Baker?" "That would be Carlos Ramirez, sir. He's our lead concierge on the night shift. Please ask him to come see me right away." As Lisa hurried off, Anthony took a moment to collect his thoughts. Firing Baker had been necessary, but it was only the first step. The culture problems at this hotel ran deeper than one manager, and addressing them would require both immediate action and long-term planning. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. A man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and a neatly pressed uniform stood in the doorway. "Mr. Wilson, I'm Carlos Ramirez. Lisa said you wanted to see me." Anthony stood and extended his hand. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Carlos. Please have a seat." Carlos sat down, his posture straight, his expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Is everything all right, sir? We don't often get visits from the CEO, especially not at this hour." "No, everything is not all right," Anthony said frankly. "I've just terminated Mr. Baker's employment due to discriminatory service practices. Until a replacement arrives, I need someone to temporarily oversee front desk operations. Lisa mentioned you're the most senior staff member currently on duty." Carlos blinked in surprise. "Yes, I've been with the company for 12 years now. But sir, my experience is mainly in concierge services, not front desk management." "I understand that," Anthony nodded. "I'm not asking you to take over permanently. A temporary night manager is on her way from our downtown location. But for the next hour or so, I need someone with experience and good judgment to keep things running smoothly." Carlos sat up straighter. "I can certainly do that, Mr. Wilson. What exactly happened with Mr. Baker, if you don't mind my asking?" Anthony considered how much to share. Transparency was important, but so was discretion. "Let's just say he was making service decisions based on inappropriate criteria. I'll explain more fully to the entire staff shortly." Carlos nodded slowly, his expression darkening with understanding. "I see. To be honest, sir, some of us had concerns about certain patterns in how guests were being treated. But it's difficult to speak up about a superior." "I understand that," Anthony said. "And I want you to know that's going to change. Part of what I'll be implementing here is a better system for staff to report concerns without fear of retaliation." He paused, studying Carlos carefully. "How long have you noticed these patterns?" Carlos shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps 6 months or so. It wasn't always obvious, just little things at first. Certain guests being made to wait longer for service. Comments made during staff meetings about the type of clientele we wanted to attract. Subtle stuff that was easy to dismiss as ordinary business decisions rather than, well, what they actually were." Anthony nodded grimly. "Thank you for your honesty. That timeline matches the complaint data I've reviewed." He stood up. "Let's go talk to the staff. The employee break room was crowded with anxious faces when Anthony and Carlos arrived. About 15 staff members, ranging from housekeeping to kitchen to front desk, had gathered, their conversations dropping to silence as Anthony entered. "Good evening, everyone," Anthony began. "For those who don't know me, I'm Anthony Wilson, CEO of Horizon Hospitality Group. I wasn't planning to reveal my identity during this stay, but circumstances have made that necessary." He scanned the room, noting the mix of confusion, curiosity, and apprehension on the faces before him. Mr. Baker is no longer employed by this hotel or by Horizon Hospitality Group. His employment was terminated effective immediately due to discriminatory service practices that violate both company policy and our core values as an organization. A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Anthony held up a hand for silence. "I understand this is sudden and it leaves you without a night manager. A temporary replacement, Gabriela Torres from our downtown location, will be arriving shortly. In the meantime, Carlos will be overseeing front desk operations." A young woman in a kitchen uniform raised her hand tentatively. "Sir, does this have something to do with the room service orders tonight?" Anthony nodded. "Yes. I checked into this hotel incognito, as I occasionally do at all our properties. When I ordered room service, I was denied service while other guests received theirs. Further investigation revealed this was part of a pattern of discriminatory practices that had been ongoing for some time." The kitchen staff exchanged glances, and Anthony noticed several nods of recognition. This hadn't been a secret among the staff, even if it hadn't been officially acknowledged. "I want to be very clear about something," Anthony continued. "What happened here is not acceptable. Not now, not ever. Every guest who walks through our doors deserves the same high level of service, regardless of their name, appearance, background, or room category." He paused, looking at each person in turn. "But I'm not here just to deliver bad news. I'm here to ensure that this hotel gets back on track. Tomorrow morning, we'll be holding a full staff meeting to discuss changes that will be implemented moving forward. For tonight, I simply ask that you continue to provide excellent service to all our guests." An older man in a maintenance uniform spoke up. "Mr. Wilson, some of us tried to raise concerns before. Will there be a better way to do that going forward?" "Absolutely," Anthony assured him. "One of the first changes we'll implement is a direct line to regional management for any staff member who observes policy violations or concerning behavior. Your voices matter and they should be heard." A visible sense of relief seemed to wash over the room. For many of these employees, Anthony realized, the discriminatory practices had been a source of discomfort and moral conflict, but they'd felt powerless to challenge them. "Any other questions before we get back to work?" Anthony asked. A front desk clerk raised her hand. "Will there be other terminations?" It was the question hanging in the air, the one everyone wanted to ask but most were afraid to. Anthony understood their concern. "My focus right now is on fixing the culture, not punishing individuals," he said carefully. "Unless I discover that others were actively promoting discriminatory practices, there won't be further terminations. What I'm looking for is commitment to positive change going forward." The tension in the room noticeably decreased. Anthony smiled encouragingly. "All right, everyone. Thank you for your attention. Carlos will be your point person until Ms. Torres arrives. And remember, equal excellent service for all guests." As the staff dispersed back to their posts, Anthony noticed a few lingering to speak with Carlos, their expressions now more determined than anxious. Change was already beginning, simply by naming the problem and making it clear that it wouldn't be tolerated. Anthony stepped out of the break room and checked his phone. It was nearly midnight, and his original mission, to get dinner, seemed like it had happened days ago rather than hours. His stomach rumbled, reminding him that he still hadn't eaten. Lisa approached him in the hallway. "Mr. Wilson, the kitchen staff asked me to tell you that they've prepared a meal for you. They'd like to serve it in your room, if that's acceptable." Anthony smiled, touched by the gesture. "That would be very nice, thank you." As he headed toward the elevator, Anthony reflected on the night's events. What had begun as a routine incognito visit had uncovered a serious problem, one that might never have come to light had he not experienced it personally. It was a powerful reminder of why these unannounced stays were so important, and why connecting with staff at all levels was essential to maintaining the company's values. The real work would begin tomorrow, with a comprehensive review of practices and policies. But for tonight, Anthony had taken the first crucial step toward restoring the Westfield Grand to what it should be, a place where every guest was treated with equal respect and dignity, regardless of who they were or where they came from. Morning light streamed through the conference room windows as Anthony adjusted his tie. In the 12 hours since Baker's termination, he'd gotten little sleep, instead working through the night with David Chen and Gabriela Torres to prepare for today's all-staff meeting. The room was filling up quickly, employees from all departments filing in with expressions ranging from curiosity to anxiety. Anthony spotted Carlos near the front, now looking more rested than he had during their midnight conversation. Beside him sat Gabriela, the temporary night manager who had arrived from the downtown location shortly after midnight. She had taken over smoothly, her calm competence exactly what the hotel needed during this transition. David Chen stood at Anthony's side, reviewing notes on his tablet. As Horizon's head of operations, David would be instrumental in implementing the changes they'd outlined during their pre-dawn strategy session. "Looks like we've got almost everyone," David murmured, glancing at his watch. "Just waiting on the morning kitchen staff to finish breakfast service." Anthony nodded. "We'll give them 5 more minutes." He used the time to scan the faces in the room. Some he recognized from last night's impromptu meeting, but many were seeing him for the first time. Word had spread quickly. The whispered conversations and sidelong glances told him that everyone knew something significant had happened, even if they didn't know all the details. At precisely 9:30, Anthony stepped to the front of the room. The conversations died down immediately, all eyes turning toward him. "Good morning, everyone," he began. "For those who don't know me, I'm Anthony Wilson, CEO of Horizon Hospitality Group. This isn't how I typically introduce myself during my hotel visits. Usually I check in as a regular guest to experience our properties the way our customers do." A few knowing smiles appeared among the night staff who had been present for last night's revelation. "What I experienced yesterday evening revealed some serious problems at this location, problems that run counter to everything our company stands for." Anthony's tone was serious but not accusatory. Mr. Baker is no longer with the company. His termination was necessary and immediate, but it's only the first step in addressing the issues we've uncovered. A hand went up in the middle row. Anthony nodded toward a woman in a housekeeping uniform. "Sir, we've heard rumors, but most of us don't know exactly what happened," she said. "That's a fair point," Anthony acknowledged. "Yesterday evening I checked into this hotel as a regular guest. When I ordered room service, I was denied, told that service had ended for the night despite our advertised 24-hour availability. I then confirmed that other guests were still receiving room service at the same time." Murmurs rippled through the room. Anthony continued. "Further investigation revealed that this wasn't an isolated incident. There was a pattern of selective service, particularly regarding room service, that appeared to be based on guests' names, room categories, and other factors that have no place in our decision-making." He paused, letting the information sink in. "Let me be absolutely clear. Discrimination of any kind has no place in this company. Every guest who walks through our doors deserves the same high standard of service, regardless of their name, appearance, background, or the type of room they've booked." Anthony glanced at David, who stepped forward with a stack of folders. "Today marks the beginning of significant changes at the Westfield Grand," Anthony continued. "Mr. Chen will be distributing detailed information packets outlining these changes, but I want to highlight the key points now." He moved to the whiteboard and wrote immediate changes. "First, we're implementing a direct reporting system for any staff member who witnesses or experiences discrimination, harassment, or policy violations. This will be a confidential channel that goes directly to regional management and HR, bypassing local management entirely if necessary." Anthony wrote the next point. "New leadership. Gabriela Torres, whom some of you met last night, will be serving as interim night manager while we conduct a thorough search for a permanent replacement. We're looking for someone who embodies our values of inclusion, respect, and excellence in service." Next, he wrote training. "Starting next week, all staff will participate in expanded diversity and inclusion training. This isn't just a box-checking exercise. It's an opportunity for all of us to examine our biases and improve how we serve our diverse clientele." Finally, he added, accountability. We're implementing new metrics to track service delivery across all guest demographics. These will be reviewed weekly to ensure that we're providing consistent, high-quality service to everyone who stays with us. Anthony turned back to face the room. These changes aren't punitive. They're about making the Westfield Grand the best it can be, a place where both guests and employees are treated with dignity and respect. A young man in a server's uniform raised his hand. "Mr. Wilson, what about staff who were just following Mr. Baker's instructions? Are we in trouble too?" It was the question Anthony had been expecting, the fear lurking beneath the surface for many employees. "Following orders doesn't absolve us of responsibility," Anthony said carefully. "But I understand the power dynamics involved. My focus isn't on punishing past actions, but on creating a better future. What I need from each of you moving forward is a commitment to our core values and a willingness to speak up when those values are compromised." The relief in the room was palpable. Anthony continued, his tone warming. "I want to acknowledge something important. Many of you knew things weren't right but felt powerless to change them. That ends today. Your voices matter. Your perspectives matter. And starting now, you'll have the tools and support you need to uphold the standards that make Horizon Properties special." David stepped forward, distributing the packets to department heads who began passing them among their teams. Anthony watched as staff members flipped through the pages, some nodding with approval, others looking surprised by the scope of the changes. "Now," Anthony said, clapping his hands together, "I'd like to open the floor for questions, concerns, or suggestions. This is your hotel as much as it is mine, and I want to hear from you." For the next hour, Anthony and David fielded questions from staff at all levels. Some were practical concerns about implementation. Others were deeper questions about company culture and values. Anthony answered each one thoughtfully, never rushing or dismissing even the simplest questions. By the time the meeting concluded, the mood in the room had transformed. Where there had been uncertainty and anxiety, there was now a cautious optimism, a sense that real change might actually be possible. As the staff filed out to return to their duties, Carlos approached Anthony. "Mr. Wilson, I just wanted to thank you," he said quietly. "Not just for what you're doing for the hotel, but for how you're doing it. Many of us have wanted to see changes like this for a long time." Anthony smiled, genuinely touched. "Thank you, Carlos. Change isn't easy, but it's necessary, and it only works when everyone is on board." Carlos nodded thoughtfully. "You know, when you first revealed who you were last night, I was worried this would all blow over after you left, that we'd get a stern warning and then go back to business as usual. I've seen that happen before." "Not this time," Anthony assured him. "In fact, I've extended my stay through the end of the week to personally oversee the initial transition." After Carlos departed, Anthony turned to David. "What's next on our agenda?" David consulted his tablet. "Regional management team is arriving at noon for a briefing. PR wants to know if we're making any public statements about the changes here, and HR is finalizing the job posting for the new night manager position." Anthony nodded. "No public statements for now. This isn't about publicity, it's about making meaningful change. And tell HR I want to personally review all final candidates for the position." "Will do," David said. "Oh, and I almost forgot. The customer satisfaction tracking system you wanted. IT says they can have it implemented by end of day tomorrow." "Excellent," Anthony said. "The sooner we have data, the sooner we can ensure we're making a real difference." 6 months later, Anthony stood in the lobby of the Westfield Grand, admiring the newly installed artwork, pieces created by local artists from diverse backgrounds. The hotel had undergone a transformation that went far beyond decor. Mia Phillips, the new night manager who had replaced Baker, greeted him with a warm handshake. "Welcome back, Mr. Wilson. The team is excited for your visit." "I'm excited to be here," Anthony replied honestly. "How are those satisfaction scores looking?" Mia beamed with pride. "Highest in the region for the 3rd month running. And the distribution is exactly what we want to see, consistent across all guest demographics. And staff turnover? Down 60%. The direct reporting system has been a game changer for morale. People feel heard now." Anthony nodded, satisfied. "And Carlos? How's he doing in his new role?" "Thriving," Mia said. "The Diversity and Inclusion Committee he's heading has become a model for other properties in the region." As they walked through the lobby, Anthony noticed subtle but meaningful changes everywhere, from the multilingual welcome signs to the diverse staff interacting confidently with guests from all backgrounds. What had begun as a painful incident had catalyzed a transformation that was now bearing fruit. Later that evening, Anthony ordered room service, the same burger and fries he had been denied 6 months ago. When it arrived promptly, delivered with a smile by a staff member who treated him with the same courtesy they would show any guest, he felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond business metrics. The real measure of success wasn't in satisfaction scores or reduced turnover, though those were important. It was in creating an environment where every guest and employee was treated with equal dignity and respect, where excellence in service wasn't reserved for some, but extended to all. As he enjoyed his meal, Anthony reflected on how a single moment of discrimination had led to sweeping changes across not just the Westfield Grand, but all Horizon properties. The incident had become a teaching moment throughout the organization, a powerful reminder that living up to your values required vigilance, courage, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. The story of what had happened at the Westfield Grand, how room service was refused to the CEO, and how that refusal led to meaningful change, had become something of a legend within the company. But for Anthony, it wasn't about being a legend. It was about building a company where such incidents would never happen again, where every person who walked through their doors would be treated as the most important guest in the hotel, regardless of who they were or where they came from. That, he thought as he finished his perfectly prepared burger, was the true measure of hospitality.